Will this be the last ODI World Cup? Dun, dun, dun. I know that sounds kind of weird, but ODI cricket has been dying for some time, or slipping away, or being less relevant, however you want to put it. And the only thing that gives it life at all at the moment is the World Cup. So why not just follow the current trends and change it to a T20 format and be done with all the nonsense of this ancient format and just play the one that is actually working?
This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager.
A while back, KSR tweeted a thread that said this straight out. This is the last 50 over World Cup. And it's a good thread, and I'll try and summarize a few of the main points for you. One-day international cricket is really hard to sell for advertisers. They peak at odd times and not as often as T20 matches, because T20 matches are shrunken versions of T20 that are supposed to peak more often. And it's also true that people do not sit down and watch ODIs in full anymore, certainly not the way that they did in the 90s. And they are no longer the party format of cricket. Remember, at one stage, if you wanted to really enjoy yourself at a cricket game, you would go to an ODI. Now most people go to T20. And these two things are hard to overcome. Plus, as he points out, the IPL will only get bigger, longer, crucially. We always hear these things about how the IPL makes all this money. But if teams played 40 games a year instead of 15, there would be a lot more money to be made. And that may not happen now, but that expansion period is certainly not that far off. And when the IPL gets bigger, the weakest part of international cricket will probably be the one that is squeezed. And right now, that is by a long distance, one-day internationals. Not to mention that every other cricket board also wants a league that they think will make them IPL money. Of course they won't, but maybe they will in the future at least become decent-sized local leagues or feeder leagues for the IPL owners, which means there'll still be a little bit of money there. But the reason bilateral tournaments don't work in most countries is because there isn't a lot of money to be made in that TV market. T20 helps you get more money because people watch the games every single night, and that's certainly better than ODI on a Tuesday and then another ODI on a Friday. But in the end, everyone is already thinking that local small T20 leagues are easier to run and has more of a future than bilateral ODIs. There is also quite clearly no room in the calendar. That has been true for quite some time now, if we're being honest. Right before the IPL, many high-profile players said there was too much cricket, and we just added more and more and more. Recently, we had a new Future Tours program, and despite the fact that we knew that T20 leagues had changed everything, they still crammed as much international cricket into the calendar as they could fit. While there is a calendar that we use, cricket authorities will find a way to stuff it. I mean, have a look at the county schedules from the 1950s, or even some of the tours in the 1800s. People will pack things in while they make money. In fact, the only reason there'll be less cricket is if it stops making as much cash as it currently is. And KSR's last point is that bilateral ODIs are basically dead now.
Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geo-block. Go to Surfshark and type my name in, KIMBER, and get 3 months free today. I've just had a bunch of conversations with people on Twitter where they keep asking why we don't have tri-series and quad series anymore. People aren't even watching their home teams the way that they used to. Why would they watch neutral games? And not to mention that the biggest teams don't even use their main players. Crowds and ratings are down. And as KSR points out, you can't make money from most bilateral series to actually justify them existing. And he's not alone in believing this. Mark Nicholas has taken his new job at the MCC and said bilateral ODIs must die. I first wrote this back in 2008.
Once T20 was a hit, the idea that normal bilateral series would still be needed just didn't make any sense. And at that point, you could easily have set up a system of friendlies around World Cups and great qualifying events. Cricket decided not to do any of that and decided to continue to push all three of their codes despite much of their own research telling them it was a stupid idea. And just think about the Mark Nicholas thing for a moment here. Let's imagine we do stop playing bilaterals and we just continue the 50 over World Cup. But as KSR had said on this actual thread, that may not work. And the reason is simple. List A cricket is barely played by any major players in the world. And so you would now have a situation where teams would warm up for a World Cup without any of them playing in that format at all. And think of football. International teams don't actually have bilaterals outside of the odd small tournament or a friendly. But their players are playing football all the time. We're asking players to continue to play ODI cricket as the biggest event while they won't be playing that format basically at any other time. It's not a realistic plan going forward. So you may now be thinking, yeah, I guess KSR is right. This could be the last 50 over World Cup. However, I don't think it will be. And it's not that KSR is wrong. And he's clearly spoken to a bunch of people inside the game and they all see what is coming. But KSR has not factored in the most important part. Cricket moves slow. Yes, broadcasters are starting to work out that T20 is their future. But as it stands, on a per day basis, the ODI World Cup still gets more viewers than the T20 World Cup. And while the broadcasters expect that to shift somewhere in the early part of the next right cycle, it hasn't done that yet. Also, there is a concern that playing a longer T20 World Cup might not translate as well straight away. So again, you would have a shorter tournament with less viewers. So in order for this to happen, the broadcasters and the boards have to take a small risk. The broadcasters might do that. But why would the boards do that if the numbers for the ODI World Cup are still quite strong? It's much more likely that they'll do what cricket always does. They'll just wait for the T20 World Cup to be bigger than the 50 over World Cup and then do it. The rating times argument that KSR makes is sound. ODIs peak at certain points and not all the way through. The one thing he hasn't factored in though is a lot of sport does this. And also the other thing he hasn't factored in is that a longer day allows for more peaks. And if someone plays a great innings, it goes for longer. If Virat Kohli is making 100 in a T20 game, by the time you turn on your TV, he's probably going to be out. In a one-day game, he might make 150 or 170 or 200. When it comes to ratings, traditionally TV broadcasters loved ODI cricket because they could play more ads. But obviously, if you can get more money per ad for the 3 hours of T20, you'll ditch that. But this is another very important thing. Streaming platforms are very different to TV companies. Remember that autoplay that comes up at the end of your favorite show on Netflix or Amazon Prime or wherever you watch stuff? That is to keep you plugged in for as long as possible. Do you know what does that really well? ODI cricket, certainly more than T20. And it's not just streaming either. Social media plays a huge part in modern sport. And being that there's so much to do in just normal everyday life now, and one thing that actually brings people back to watching live sport is excitement on social media for that. Again, the more cricket, the better in that kind of situation. Not to mention that social media just builds your brand awareness, and there are more balls per match to go viral in a longer format. But where I think KSR is slightly wrong at the moment is what I've always called the Big Mac conundrum. McDonald's were always known for their signature burger, but people don't eat them as much as before. Younger people are much more likely to be vegetarian or pescatarian, or many people don't eat beef for environmental reasons, not to mention big parts of the world just don't eat beef. And some people even eat salads at McDonald's. Why would you do that?
Wait a minute! Who are you?
But McDonald's still sell the Big Mac. And the simple reason is because it makes money. If the ODI World Cup was tanking or even slowing down, there would be a very big chance that this would be the last tournament we would have. That is not what is currently happening. It is very rare for anyone to kill something that is making a profit. It's even more unlikely for cricket boards to do that. But then finally, there's one other thing that I think is incredibly important here. Almost all the decision makers in cricket are over the age of 35. That means that they all grew up with the ODI World Cups as the major part of their cricket experience as they grew up. Chances are, for a lot of them, they wouldn't have even watched any T20 cricket until they were an adult. Most of these administrators are squarely from the ODI generation, growing up between 1977 and 2003. So you're telling me these are the people who are going to kill off 50 over cricket while it is getting more viewers than the T20 World Cup? That's a pretty big stretch. Hey, Mr. Cricket Administrator, please kill your childhood. It's not a great sell, is it? Now, where KSR is right is that if you follow the trajectory of cricket as it currently stands, the ODI World Cup will die. 50 over cricket is clearly being phased out and T20 is only getting bigger. But I think the chances of this being the last 50 over World Cup is at best 20%. Though I would say that the following tournament, there is a really good chance that that might be the last one. And I say all this as the man in 2011 who, with his friend, was sick and tired of people saying Test cricket is dying when it quite clearly wasn't. And I don't know if ODI cricket will last or not. I don't know if Saudi Arabia will come in and buy cricket. We don't actually know what the future is going to be. There might be some billionaire somewhere who loves 50 over cricket so much, he just ends up with his own version of the 50 over IPL. We don't know. But what I do know is, in cricket, things tend to stick around for as long as possible. And maybe all ODI cricket is doing in this World Cup is just playing out for a draw. But the truth is, there is a small chance this may be the last 50 over World Cup we ever see. And if you've grown up with it as a massive part of your cricketing life, that will be sad. But the truth is that 50 over cricket is just not that popular anymore. And if it was, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.